Poised for Exit is a show for business owners who want to achieve a successful exit based on their own terms. Your business exit will likely be the biggest financial transaction of your life, and for most, you'll have one shot at doing it right. The topics and guests we feature and the stories they share will provide valuable ideas and strategies to improve operations and grow enterprise value so you can achieve the best possible exit outcome. Now here's your host, award-winning certified exit planning advisor, Julie Keys.
Welcome everyone to Poised for Exit, the exit planning podcast show. Our guest today is the CEO of a company that offers services in sales, leadership, growth strategy, and customer retention for complex products and services. We're going to hear from him right after these messages from our show sponsors, so please stay with us. Are you a business owner getting ready to transition? If so, I recommend True North Mergers and Acquisitions as your confidential strategic partner. They understand your business sale isn't just about one buyer and the price, but what you net that counts. In other words, what you get to keep. When you're ready for a higher level of representation that delivers consistent results, contact True North M&A to do the heavy lifting of selling your business. Learn more at tnma.com. That's tnma.com.
Exiting your business is a big deal, both financially and emotionally. I'm John Marquet, certified exit planning advisor with TrustPoint. We help business owners transition smoothly on their terms. Our focus is on maximizing value, minimizing stress, and giving you confidence in what's next. Whether you're selling or passing the torch, we make the process seamless. Start planning today at trustpointinc.com. That's trustpointinc.com.
For business owners, it can be overwhelming to start planning a transition or exit strategy, but it's so important to avoid unwanted outcomes and unexpected tax bills. The CPAs at JAK, John A. Knutson & Company, can guide you and help make sense of the numbers. Our firm was established over 90 years ago, and we've assisted countless companies with ownership transitions. Leaving your business is a process that takes time. So contact us today to discuss your situation. Visit our website at jakcpa.com. That's jakcpa.com.
My name is Todd Crow, and I'm the president of the Twin Cities Exit Planning Chapter. If you're a business owner and advisor and want to learn more about the world of exit planning, you're invited to visit the Twin Cities chapter of the Exit Planning Institute. You can expect top-level education delivered by subject matter experts at every monthly meeting. Grow your network and draw from the learning that could be a game changer for your business or your practice. There's no pressure to become a member, so come and see what the buzz is all about. Our meetings are held the second Wednesday of the month, 7:30 to 9 a.m. See the show notes for more information and registration links.
Hello, Poised for Exit listeners. Our guest today is Tony Morse, who is the CEO of Proliferate Performance and Profit. And I've known Tony for a long time, and you're going to want to hear this interview. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Julie. It's great to be here. Excited to be talking with you again.
Yeah, for sure. So I like to start every interview with, especially for people who haven't been on the show before, because I know you're going to be sharing some really great nuggets with our listeners. But how did you get here? How did you get to this place in your career? I know sales has always been at the forefront for you, but it's important. I think it's good for our listeners to understand, what motivates you and why are you doing this now?
Sure. So the real short version, as you alluded to, I've been in sales since I was about 8 years old, selling cans of pop outside the Minnesota State Fair. So I've really always been in sales in some fashion. Yeah. Part of me that a lot of people know.
That had to be profitable.
It was a fantastic experience for me.
Awesome.
But about 6 years ago, I had been nudged by a friend to explore fractional sales leadership. As you know, fractional everything has come a long ways in the last 8-10 years. And when I took on my first couple of fractional sales leadership roles, I discovered really quickly that there was a lot of building that needed to be done around those organizations. And there were a lot of gaps around the sales team, the processes, and a lot of work to do there. So we really evolved pretty quickly from just providing, bodies managing and leading sales teams to really helping outline a growth strategy and growth plan for our clients and help bring those to life. So that's the short version of how we ended up here.
Awesome. And you use the word leader a few times, and I know that you're a great leader, and you've been a leader of companies as well as not just sales teams, but now you're leading your own company. And all the things that you said about the why, I totally get, because so many times in so many different companies that I've worked with over the years, there are a handful of salespeople who don't have a process, and there's 1 or 2 out of 10 that are doing the majority of the selling, and the rest are just kind of trying to figure it out, going through the motions. Maybe they don't have enough direction. But the service that you provide, especially like I said in the beginning of the show, with the complex products and services, I think that that makes so much sense. So let's just talk about some of the things, the top things when you're working with founders and owners. What is it that they need to know about actually building a revenue engine? I love that. That's a great term, a revenue engine. It makes it sound like it's going to keep going like a train, right?
We sure hope so. We sure hope so.
Mm-hmm.
When we spend time with founders and business owners and leaders, there are a lot of things to focus on. Where it really starts, though, is making sure that they've got a process and a sales program that can operate without them. Too often what we find are owners and leaders that are really integral to the sales process, to the sales team, and it's almost impossible to replicate a founder or CEO.
Yes.
Sales teams just don't have the title, they don't have the relationships, they rarely have the product or service knowledge because they didn't build it like the founder did. And so the sales programs that founders and owners really need has to focus on growth, scalability. Otherwise, ultimately, they won't get to an exit. And the customer knowledge and the value that the customers get from working with them, won't really be exposed to the rest of the sales team and ultimately to the next owners of the business.
Yeah, boy, and that's really that owner centricity, especially in the sales area, is very common, and it's not an easy one to remedy. So I'm glad that you guys are kind of attacking that, because that really does impact the transferability of the business. So tell me more about that. Like, what are some of the things that you're actually seeing with these companies? If you have any examples that you could share, that would be helpful too.
Sure. What I would say is there are typically three things that we see that companies don't have in place as they're preparing for an exit. The first is forecasting.
Mm,
Often they are lacking reliable and predictable forecasting, which comes down ultimately to pipeline management and sales operations for the team. Having something that they can point to that says, I know what revenue will look like in the next months and quarters and ultimately for the year. So forecasting is one. The second is process. To get to a reliable and predictable forecast, you really need to have good sales process, so
mm,
that you know what's happening at each stage of the buying process, and the likelihood of winning and advancing from each stage, so that you can build out a weighted pipeline. So process is vital. And then finally, as I alluded to before, is leadership. Again, often founder-led or owner-led sales teams need a leader for the sales team that can both ensure accountability to the activities that it takes to lead to success, and also someone who can coach and support the salesperson or the salespeople through deal strategy and getting to a win. So really, those three things: forecasting, process, and leadership, are the most common gaps that we typically see.
And it would make sense to me that you have to have some kind of forecast that you can overlay your individual salesperson's goals with, right? To make sure that they
Yeah,
align. Because otherwise you kind of got the Wild West, right?
exactly,
You and I both
exactly.
know that so many companies don't have a solid strategic plan for growth and improvement. And if there's no strategic plan, we don't really even know where we're going. We're just kind of getting in the car, driving around. And then you got
Yeah,
salespeople that are kind of doing the same thing.
yeah. Well, and that reminds me of one of the key points that I really appreciated from your book, from Poised for Exit, is the question of looking at your own business as a buyer and whether you'd buy it. And
Hmm.
without that solid, predictable forecast and a program that can operate without the owner, without that, there's just no way to demonstrate that the business can grow predictably, which is something that bankers certainly want, but buyers want just as much, if not more.
They certainly do. Yeah, we all know cash is king, and you can't build up, right, an amount of cash in your business if you're not driving a very successful revenue engine. And that, of course, all comes with making sure that your salespeople know the process and actually are following it within, like, reason, right? Because we want to be somewhat flexible. I mean, really good
Oh
salespeople
yeah,
tend to be kind of like mavericks, right? So
yeah.
how do
There's
you what were you going to say? Go ahead.
I was going to say, there's we do a lot of assessing of sales talent, and one of the things that we often look for is very low in terms of compliance and conscientiousness, so that they're willing to break some glass, they're willing to not abide by the buyer's sale buying process. But
Hmm.
that often creates other internal issues. But absolutely, we
Right.
want a little bit of maverick in every salesperson for sure.
Hmm. Hmm. And so, you probably have seen this many times where you come into a company and they made the mistake of taking one of their best salespeople and putting them in a management position. And
Yeah,
you kind of set them up to fail at that point, right? Because they're not managers, they're not the same thing, but they thought they were doing a good thing.
exactly.
Yeah. And so for an owner to just go out and hire a sales leader to remedy whatever situation they have with their salespeople, um, is that something that could work? I'm thinking no, not without a process.
You nailed it. There have been a lot of studies out there, and most show that a first sales leader and a new sales leader coming in fails within the first year at a rate of 45 to 75%. So,
Mm,
you can't just hire a sales leader and hope it's going to work. There are a lot of reasons for it. You mentioned one, which is, the difference between being a really good salesperson and being a really good sales manager and sales leader. That's certainly one of the challenges and issues. Often the expectations between the owner, founder, CEO, whatever title that person has, and the
hmm.
sales leader just aren't aligned. Most sales leaders are not equipped to build the sales program and implement it. They're usually
Right.
hired to manage a team within an existing sales program. So, that's why so many of them tend to fail is the owner or founder or CEO says, all right, I need somebody to build out the sales process and the sales team. And what they really get is somebody who can manage within one. So, when it comes down to it, they need the scaffolding or the infrastructure built around them so that they can focus on driving revenue and the team and not figuring out how the sales process should work. And these are things like ideal client profile, buying process, CRM and pipeline management, account planning and growth programs. Naturally, there are also compensation considerations to ensure that the behaviors you want out of the salespeople are aligned with the rewards or incentives. And then, of course, sales team structure, territories, all of those things, that get back to goals and metrics, and the handoffs internally. So there's a lot to building out a sales program beyond just leading a sales team. Don't just go hire a sales leader. It will almost never work.
Right. And, bringing people in that don't necessarily have good direction on what they're supposed to do tends to be a big situation of frustration for everybody, right? And a lot of lost time
Yeah.
and money. Yeah. So maybe you could break down for our listeners a little bit, just like an illustration, if you will, of what it looks like to work with Proliferate. What does an ideal client look like for you? And how do you go in and take them from mess to success?
I really appreciate the question, Julie. So, I mean, in terms of our ideal client profile, I'll start by saying that the vast majority of our clients are owned by more than one individual. So
Sure.
it isn't often just a single owner. It
Hmm.
happens,
Hmm.
but often multi-owner businesses. In most cases, and you mentioned this early on, they're selling complex products or services, things that really will require a consultative sales process.
Yeah. Yeah.
These are not just transactions.
Of course.
And then naturally, business to business is where we tend to play almost exclusively.
Got it.
Beyond that, The size of our clients range. We've worked with very, very small early stage companies up to our largest is about $1.2 billion in revenue. So, I
Okay.
mean, there's really, really a span. I would say the vast majority of our clients are probably under 75 or under 100 million.
Hmm.
And they're bringing in their first sales leader, or they're thinking about bringing in a permanent sales leader. Again, they're really making that evolution from founder led to professional sales.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, yeah. At that level for sure, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
in terms of how we work, there's the old cliche that's not really a cliche, that you have two ears and one mouth, use them proportionately in selling. We take the same approach with our clients. When
Hmm.
it comes down to it, we really want to spend a lot more time listening and understanding, how do they do things today? How do their customers get value from them? How does the sales team work? What is effective? What's not effective? What does the rest of the organization think and believe about the sales team? And use all of those inputs to build out a plan for how they scale and grow the sales organization appropriately. There's no one size fits all. There's no, here's the playbook that we come in and attach to each client. But when it comes down to it, our focus is on understanding what works, what doesn't work, what do your customers expect, and then building to help support that.
Yeah.
And naturally, their ability to change at certain paces will affect how quickly we bring change.
Hmm.
And budget certainly plays a part of that as well. So
For sure. Yeah. Well, and then you're going to deal with the people side of things too, right? Where you've got people that have been doing it in a certain way for such a long time, and they like the way they do things, and the owners aren't necessarily going to push too hard because they're doing a lot of selling, right?
yep,
So,
yep.
yeah. Yeah, but I know you and I know your style, and I'm sure that you got that all figured out. So, and then you've got a
Well,
whole team of people, right, with different specialties. We didn't even go there yet.
we do. We're fortunate to be in an environment now where there are a lot of very, very experienced sales leaders out there who are now at a point in their career where they don't necessarily need to work or don't want to work full time or just with one company. And so we're able to bring experience from much larger multinational companies to the growing smaller companies at a level that most of our clients couldn't usually attract this kind of talent. So yeah, we've got a very, very neat and robust team. Any of them could be building and growing a company like ours, but instead they're helping to support our clients and our team together. So
That's awesome. So let's look at the companies that have had fluctuating growth, right? They're kind of going up and down. And over the last few years, maybe since COVID, who knows, seems like
sure,
we use that as a measuring stick still. But, um, but, the economy is going to become weaker, stronger. It really does depend, right? It fluctuates too.
right.
But people are still buying and selling, and things are still really good out there, at least from my perspective. And I'm sure it is for you too. So, but you get the companies that are really struggling or have been struggling and they can't figure it out. So let's talk about that. What do you recommend? Like when you go in and they have these pain points, what does that look like?
Sure. Well, I mean, what you're talking about are those that don't have consistent growth, right?
Hmm.
And to your point, they don't necessarily know what's going on. I'd say the first step is one that we've heard in other programs, which is admit that you have a problem, right? Let's let's start
Yeah.
and recognize that we need to do something differently.
Elephant in the room.
And
Yeah.
so, yep. So don't delay building that sales engine. Take a step back, honestly evaluate why they think they aren't growing consistently. I've had conversations, one of our clients, I sat down with the CEO and the CFO together and said, all right, what do you think the bottlenecks are to your growth? And they both of them almost unanimously or simultaneously said, it's our sales leader. He's in the way. He's slowing things down. Now they were
Hmm.
able to come to me with that. There are other times where we were brought in by another CEO who thought that he had a salesperson on the team who could become the next sales leader. And we went down that path and started to evaluate the skills and experience that this person brought, and pretty quickly recognized that they needed a different plan.
Yeah.
So there are times that they know what the issue is. There are times that they don't. But having a conversation to understand where the breakdowns or where the gaps are, those are the conversations I love having every day. I worked with a CEO about 20 some odd years ago who used to say, talk to everybody, be nice to everybody, and help everybody. It will come back. And so I have a lot of conversations with CEOs and CFOs. And if I'm able to help them without a formal engagement and offer some observations and thoughts, I'm glad to do that. We've had I'll call them conversations with presidents and CEOs that have spanned 12 to 18 months before we ever engaged. And
Sure.
some might
Yep.
call it free consulting. I really think of it as providing goodwill and helping leaders in areas that they aren't necessarily as familiar. And at some point it will come back. So admit that you have a problem, try and figure out what it is. If you don't know, ask somebody who can help. That's
Yeah.
my kind of quick version of counsel for those that aren't showing consistent growth.
Yeah. Very good too. And I run into that myself a lot too. Sometimes it's just a timing thing. You have the consultation and you talk with them and you deliver some action items that might be helpful for them right out of the gate. And then they got to chew on it for a while. And yeah, so same here. I think timing is important. And, sometimes owners just have to throw up their hands and just go, I just can't do this on my own anymore. I have got to have someone come in and help me. And when they get to that point, then we can make something happen for them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. Maybe then what we do, well, we're at a point now where we got to close, but maybe what we do then is just share with our listeners what would be one thing or two things that they could be doing right now, like aside from getting in contact with you, which we'll have your contact info in the show notes so they can contact you for that consult that you're talking about.
Sure.
But aside from that, what's at top of mind for you?
It's some of the things that we've already talked about, but it's really recognize that no one on the sales team is going to be as dedicated, focused, or knowledgeable as you are as the top leader. But they are going to need a chance to succeed. So have some patience with the sales team, really give them the energy and the space that they need. Look at how you implement a professional sales system or a program that gets you as the top leader out of the direct involvement with the sales team. And like you said, if it comes to it, reach out and let's have a conversation.
Perfect. All right. Well, Tony, thanks for being on the show. So nice to have you with us.
My pleasure.
We'll have to do it again.
Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome. And thank you. Yeah. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. Please do share this with your friends, colleagues, clients, and so on. And join us again next time.